Welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. As Secretary of State on a state visit to Pakistan, Hilary Clinton accused Islamabad of nurturing snakes in its backyard. She was referring, of course, to the terrorists that the Pakistani state was rearing to attack its neighbors, Afghanistan and India. Well, those snakes, those terrorists, are dying mysteriously. Over the last year, at least 20 terrorists have died in Pakistan. Most of them are wanted by India for terrorism-related offences. Lakhbir Singh Rode, a Khalistani activist and nephew of Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, was wanted for the Kanishka bombing. He has died in Pakistan. And reports suggest that Sajid Mir, one of the key 2611 plotters, was poisoned in Pakistan, in a Pakistani jail, and is critically ill at the moment. Joining me to discuss this very interesting turn of events in Pakistan are Yashovardhan Azad, former Special Director, Intelligence Bureau, my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul, and my colleague Deepak Badana. Mr. Azad, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. Is Pakistan too dangerous now even for terrorists?
Well, it appears that Pakistan is very, very dangerous for the people themselves, I would say, because what is happening on the Afghanistan border,
right.
What is happening politically and the internal strife, and moreover, the kind of the situation which has been spawned upon by themselves on various fronts. I think
right.
Pakistan is in a very serious state.
Right.
I would just like to refer to your statement which you made about Hilary Clinton sometime back in Pakistan, where she said that they are guarding snakes in their backyard.
Yeah.
I think it's coming true because it's biting them now.
Right.
And if you see right from the NWFP to the area in Lahore where they were hiding these Khalistani terrorists and then shifting them also, not now, but this process has been going on for some time. Mind you, you talked about Lakhbir Singh Rode, his whole family is in Canada.
Right.
Where he himself is here. Canada is another place where these Khalistani heaven, as I would call it. So yes, right. I would say I have no compunction about the state they are in. You live by the sword, and I think you die by the sword too.
Right. Aditya, now, what information do you have on these deaths? Who's behind these deaths? And you broke that story, I remember, last year on the killing of Zahur Mistry, one of the IC-814 hijackers.
Sandeep, on Zahur Mistry, I can confirm for sure because there are multiple sources that have confirmed to me, both in India and Pakistan, that Zahur Mistry was in fact killed, and perhaps there was a particular agency that was responsible for it. We made a documentary out of it, Hunting the Hijackers, that clearly indicated and gave details of how he was hunted. It was not an overnight affair, but he was being tracked for more than 10 years. But there have been series of incidents, Sandeep, that have happened, and we've been tracking that very closely, not just in Pakistan, but all across the globe. It has led to a diplomatic standoff between India and Canada, as well as India and US as well. But just as Mr. Azad mentioned, Pakistan has been nurturing a lot of these terrorists, snakes in their backyard for a very long time. The famous one-liner by Hilary Clinton in 2011 in Pakistan, when she was meeting her counterpart. The same is true. Look at TTP. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the Taliban that Pakistan had nurtured for years together, given them safe haven, Haqqani network as well. And today itself at Warsak Road in Peshawar, near the Peshawar Public School, there's been a bomb blast in which at least 7 to 10 people have been injured, including children. So the TTP is going all guns blazing against Pakistan Army and the deep state. But there are two aspects here that are not being discussed in the main discourse. Many are blaming the Indian agencies and saying that it is the India's RNAW that could be responsible for it. But why only RNAW? Why can't it be ISI itself? What has also happened over the last 1 decade, Sandeep, is that there's tremendous pressure on Pakistan to act against terrorists. One aspect is the FATF pressure, where Pakistan was for the longest in the grey list. To prove to the Western world that Pakistan is acting against the terrorists amidst this economic, political and security turmoil within Pakistan, they may be eliminating people that are not useful for them anymore. Right. These could be elements from Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, other terror groups that were useful perhaps in the 90s and later, but have no significance anymore. So I suspect that, you may go on to blame the Indian agencies. Many may celebrate this on social media as well.
Right.
But there could be a larger angle and a conspiracy of the Pakistani deep state to please the Western masters and
Right.
tell them that, hey, we are working against terrorism and this is how we are going to deal with it.
That's an interesting point, Aditya. And in fact, Deepak, I want to bring you in on this because you've also been tracking these, terrorists in Pakistan. Do you think that it's a case of what Aditya said, that the ISI is tying up loose ends and, getting rid of these expendable characters?
I think this theory has a lot of weight, even if we may not have any concrete proof yet.
Right.
The fact is that most of the people who are dying, none of them are like the heads. Nothing's
Right.
happened to
Foot soldiers.
Saeed. These are the foot soldiers, the
Right.
people whose death may still create headlines,
Right.
but they aren't really of a great value today.
Right.
Furthermore, what you will see is that these deaths can be showcased as a different number of ways. They could be packaged to the Pakistani public
Right.
as a way of India's, covert operations or
Right.
black flag operations inside Pakistan.
Yeah.
While to the west, when there are discussions on the FATF,
Right.
Pakistan could be telling, see that we're acting on these people.
Right.
And this two-faced doublespeak of the Pakistani establishment is not something new.
Right.
We've seen it on virtually every different, say, stroke of history,
Yeah.
be it the wars, be it, the militarism in Kashmir. There's been a consistent pattern of doublespeak. I would like to hear Mr. Azad's opinion of the same.
Yeah, Mr. Adas, I was going to come to you on this, but the fact that, do you think that India has, we've got a very different, more muscular foreign policy now from what it was a few years ago. Is this muscular foreign policy now being backed with a whole lot of covert action as well, which is what it was the case we are being told some decades ago?
Let me say that all this is which is happening in foreign soil. I mean, we don't have any evidence, and the foreign minister himself has said that this is not our policy.
Right.
But there's no doubt that the intelligence agencies certainly do their job. They are tracking.
Yeah.
And one of the very important points which Aditya Kaul made was that it is not only that blaming the RAW is right, because Sajid Mir, for example, is also a wanted terrorist in the United States of America.
That's right.
Today, the United States
Yeah.
can designate anybody a terrorist and then
Right.
kill him anywhere in the world.
Right, including their own citizens. I mean, there is a case that of Anwar al-Awlaki being murdered in Yemen by a drone strike.
Exactly. And the other thing is that even in the 2611 case, some of the
Yes.
people, some of the murderers or the terrorists India
Yes.
wanted, like Headley, they did not come to India, though we were allowed to do some interrogation over there.
Right.
So ISI, some of them, another point which I want to make is some of the
Yes.
terrorists who are getting killed outside are not even in our interest. We are not even
Right.
interested in killing them because they are of no use.
Right.
Let me tell you another thing. Even
Yes.
the ISI has realized that most of this Khalistani propaganda and sloganeering which is going on is of no use because they have not been able to make any impact in Punjab.
Right.
All the criminal activities which are
Yes.
being funded from the rich countries like Canada, etc.
Right.
So the third thing I want to say is that Pakistan was, of course, very, very hopeful about Afghanistan, that this will be a
Yes.
new alliance in the entire setup, whereby we'll be able to put pressure on India. But
Right.
as Aditya Kaul said, the kind of depredations which the TDP is doing,
Right.
they are absolutely now cornered on various fronts.
Right.
So yes, they've been cooked alive, and
Yeah.
the FATF,
Right.
the only thing which was which is still saving them, I would say, in a way,
Yes.
that is leading them to kill a few terrorists here and there, and ISI is, of course, not accountable. They are busy now with the elections and making, of course, which incumbent prime minister to win.
running the government, which is what the Pakistan
Yes.
military has been doing for many years. But Aditya, this whole experiment of the Taliban being under the control of the ISI and the Pakistan army, that has spectacularly backfired, right? The attack today, of course, there have been a series of such TTP attacks over the last couple of months, each one more horrific than the other. How is the Pakistan army managing with the house on fire? I mean, they're literally 3 or 4 different types of terrorist groups that are attacking Pakistan at the moment.
One thing is very clear, Sandeep, just like the old saying goes, that you can rent an Afghan, but you can't buy him off completely.
Right.
You can't buy his conscience and his courage and valor. So this is the case with the Afghan Taliban, the TTP, and the Haqqani network as well. Pakistan for years together thought that providing a safe haven to the Haqqani network and the ilk would give them a long shelf life in Afghanistan once Taliban is in control.
Right.
The opposite happened.
Yeah.
Now we have television discussions on Tolo News and other platforms in Afghanistan where the Taliban representatives are abusing Pakistan, going all guns blazing against them. Secondly, Pakistan has no leverage now left with the Taliban. I think instead, India has come more closer to the Taliban, and you've seen the developments that have happened.
Absolutely,
with
as surprising as that sounds, and I never thought we'd actually live to see that day when that would happen.
Yeah, and lastly, what I want to stress here is the interesting fact of the many lives of Sajid Mir.
Yes.
I mean, this was a character that Pakistan said was dead. They had a grave for him. And suddenly, when the FATF proceedings were underway, Pakistan was under tremendous pressure. It was at the FATF a couple of years ago that Sajid Mir suddenly became alive. And Pakistan said that not only have them identified them, arrested him, but he's been convicted and is inside a prison. Now, I don't know if Sajid Mir has been poisoned or not, but he is certainly in Pakistan. He's been ISI's agent. He's got all the support he needs. And any agency could be responsible, for his elimination or targeting him. It could be India, it could be US, it could be Pakistan ISI themselves. They are responsible for providing a safe shelter. They, when they realize they don't need him, they can eliminate him.
Right. So, Mr. Azad, the question to you is that, what has baffled me over the last couple of decades is that how does Pakistan manage to send literally thousands of its citizens across the border, in fighting this so-called jihad in Kashmir for 40 years? There must be about 40,000 of its own citizens that it has pushed across the border willfully, literally treating them like firewood. How does it play out in in any other country, like in India, for instance? If there was even a case like this of an Indian national being pushed across the border to wage war in a foreign country, there would be a revolt. How has Pakistan managed to normalize this so-called pushing of its citizens across the border?
There are a couple of reasons here for it, I would say. And one, of course, is very, very important. This has come out in interrogations. It is almost an open thing that when you're pushing people across the border with allurement of 5 lakhs or 7 lakhs rupees for the family, and then training them at the border and then pushing them across is easy. But let me tell you today, the count of the foreign terrorists in Kashmir is hardly 150 odd. I mean, even if whether you look at the army sources or the police sources or any sources, there are hardly any numbers are there. The second thing is, of course, to prove its existence, the ISI, for example, to be in control, has to engineer something or the other. It gets a very, very fat budget on India marking. And this is one of the reasons why they are fully committed. Let me tell you another thing. Some of the interviews which were there in Pakistan from villagers who were interviewed, they said, and this is on Pakistan TV, I'm telling you, that I didn't know where my boy disappeared the other day. Of course, he was talking about some money, and we are getting some money, but we certainly wouldn't have wanted him to go to the border. So what I'm saying is there is a lot of resistance even within Pakistan. The middle class of Pakistan is unfortunately not at all with the ISI or all these people. But the whole question of being able to bait India all the time, and in the name of instability on the border, trying to get money, as Adik rightly pointed about, whether it's from the IMF, whether it's from the Americans as a strategic ally. I think these are issues which will compel Pakistan to continue with this. And let me tell you another thing, last thing. I don't think the Kashmir issue can be solved. It can be managed. And let me tell you, in another 50 years, it will automatically drop off the horizon just like that, when it will be without any use to pursue this kind of a strategy.
Just like the Khalistan issue you said is a dead horse. But Deepak, taking up on what Mr. Azad said of the fact that it's a money thing, right? It's all about money. It's the Pakistan ISI and the army indeed trying to mark up their budgets to cite this India threat. You've reported that story on the Crore commanders in Pakistan. Is it all about the money, or is there some ideology to it?
It's most definitely. I mean, see, you have to understand, when you look at the last few elections that have happened in Pakistan, an anti-India stance isn't getting them votes anymore.
Right.
Right. And you'll see most of the prime ministers who come into power, they all may come into power with an anti-India stance, but by the end of their term, each one of them has spoken about peace with India.
Right.
And that won't do for the Pakistan army,
Yeah.
because their whole stance is that we protect you from India.
Right.
Now consider this.
The reason for their existence
exactly,
is this
which is why
India
they hog
bogey.
almost 50 to 60% of the
Right.
annual budget. But now what they have is what I could say is a buffet of enemies.
Yeah.
They've got new enemies on the horizon.
Right.
And they can once again appear as the saviors that they
Right.
profess themselves to be.
Right.
It works out for the army as it always does in
Yes.
Pakistan.
Yes.
So, and the people, you have to take pity on the people of Pakistan because they bear the brunt from every end.
Right. Mr. Azad, why is India not being able to encash this thing of, these non-state actors being gunned down in Pakistan? The fact that, this actually proves the fact that Pakistan is a breeding ground for terrorists, and you have these non-state actors running around, designated global terrorists, probably the world's largest collection of such bad characters.
A whole menagerie of
Yes.
yeah.
Of snakes.
Well, let me say the kind of dossiers that NIA has compiled now, they are very, very effective, and they are doing the rounds in world capitals.
Right.
And now that they're attaching the assets of these terrorists,
Yes.
it is making a lot of difference. But on the issue of Pakistan being the supplier at a global scale of various terrorists, I think it's well known. And this is, what is being reflected is in the European capitals, wherein immigration, etc., is very, very tough. Is getting very tough for these people.
Right.
So at the level of diplomacy, I think we have done fairly well. At the level of investigation, I would say by the NIA also we have done very well. As far as the security grid in Kashmir is concerned, I would say it is very, very good. But you cannot, I mean, these lapses occur, and these kind of incidents would be occurring again and again to prove the rationale of this India baiting policy in Pakistan. But as far as the Pakistan's reputation is concerned, it is very, very well known. And those who are still backing Pakistan with money or planes or something, that is due to strategic compulsions, and you know the reasons why.
Right. Aditya, strategic compulsions, that's an interesting phrase that we hear in the context of Pakistan. You see that Pakistan's location, the fact that it's located at the crossroads of so many areas of interest for so many big powers, Pakistan army is going to keep cashing in on that geolocation of Pakistan.
I think there's a growing realization in the West also, Sandeep, particularly when Taliban took back control in Afghanistan, that there's been constantly backstabbing that the West has seen in Pakistan. The biggest example of that has been the Doha talks, the kind of agreement that happened, and the most embarrassing visuals at the Kabul airport when the US had to, in fact, embarrassingly leave. I think even more embarrassment from what happened in Vietnam. So I think there's a growing realization, but you are bang on when you say that Pakistan's nature, Pakistan's character, and Pakistan's geopolitical positioning makes it, very, important strategically for them to capitalize their situation, be it with US, be it with China, or be it with even Russia. For instance, currently we have been witnessing how Pakistan has been arming Ukraine continuously over the last 1.5 years. There have been several reports that have been doing rounds as well. And with China, China's growing influence in Afghanistan currently, Pakistan has a great role to play in that entire exercise. But even though they've fallen flat with the relations with Afghanistan currently, I would say that India has also capitalized on this situation. You don't do something, intelligence agencies don't speak about their valor or the, things that they do. But diplomatically saying, we have done enough. I think the growing relationship that India and Afghanistan had when it was the Republic of Afghanistan has also continued when there's a Taliban control. India may not approve of it, but India's relation with the people of Afghanistan really continues much more than what happens in Pakistan, which has now forced millions of Afghan refugees into homelessness and are pushing them back into Taliban's Afghanistan, perhaps to their deathbeds.
Right, absolutely. And my last question is to Mr. Azad. Sir, about 30 years back, person of Indian origin, an Indian citizen, was the cat's paw for a very large terrorist attack in Mumbai, and he remains in Pakistan for over 3 decades now. I'm referring to someone who was on your radar for many, many years, Dawood Ibrahim. How important would Dawood's killing or capture be for India at this juncture? How much of a difference will it make on India's war on terror?
Well, let me say, by the sheer name and the fame or infamy which he has gained, it'll be a tremendous what you call point of interest. Yes. As far as the value, I'm not too sure. Over the years, it would have been an excellent catch if you would have got this guy. I remember when I was with the, touring with the Indian team to Pakistan in Karachi, and when we were going to the stadium, in front of me was an ISI guy who was, giving security to us, and I smiled when we passed that Clifton Avenue, wherever he stays, and I said, "Is this the house?" And he smiled back at me. So, it was very well known that this guy has been sheltered by Pakistan, and if we could have hit him then, it would have been a great success. But right now, I would say how much he's controlling the Bollywood by way of making films, by smuggling, but in terms of actual war on terror, I don't know how much he's actually contributing. So yes, name-wise, it would be a great catch, but value-wise, I don't think much. I think he has outlived his use.
Right, interesting, and we can only hope that Dawood Ibrahim is brought to justice for his misdeeds.
Yes,
but thank you very much, Mr. Azad. It was so good hearing you. And Aditya, we'll keep coming back to you for news and updates on this very interesting aspect of geopolitics, which is Pakistani terrorists unsafe in Pakistan. Thank you. I spoke with Ambassador TCA Raghavan, former High Commissioner to Islamabad, on the state of play inside Pakistan. Here's what he had to say. Ambassador Raghavan, welcome to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you.
There's been a wave of killings inside Pakistan in the last couple of months, and I'm talking of not just ordinary terrorists, but those of very specific interest to India, the designated terrorists, the India-focused terrorists. There are so many groups in Pakistan, but the India-focused groups, many of these wanted terrorists seem to be meeting mysterious ends. Is there some kind of design behind all of this?
Very difficult to say. You see, what happens in the terrorist underworld has always a great extent of opacity surrounding it.
Right.
So we usually try to, read the tea leaves based on some isolated events and episodes, and depending on one's own views and inclinations, we make theories out of it. But in fact, there is a huge amount of opacity, and while if one looks at the statistics, it may appear that there's been a spike in the number of killings of well-known figures of great interest to us because of their involvement with acts of terrorism committed against India. But if one looks at a longer perspective, one will find that, the level of attrition amongst these individuals has always been a very high one. There's a huge amount of inter-faction, infighting, violent retribution against each other. In some cases, there's the involvement of Pakistani agencies because they felt that someone was getting too big for his boots and getting out of control, scores needing to be settled. So in all, I would say that while, yes, they may appear to be these spikes, but to my mind, we are basing whatever theory we are constructing on very limited evidence, because there have been such spikes in the past also. And in fact, these may not be spikes at all, but the normal attrition which is common amongst these terrorist groups.
Pakistan deep state itself is behind many of these killings, and for various reasons, FATF pressure, the need to show results. Could this be one of these possibilities behind this spike of killings, as you mentioned?
I don't think it is because of FATF pressure, Because if that were the case, we would see a lot of other evidence, which we are not seeing, about the attitude of the Pakistani authorities towards these terrorist groups. We would see, for instance, a much more determined effort to uproot them root and branch, rather than just put enormous restrictions so they don't create any more problems. I don't see a concerted effort by the Pakistani authorities to take action against them. But as I said, you cannot rule out the possibility that certain individuals are neutralized by Pakistani agencies themselves or their former handlers, because they were felt to be getting out of control or too big for their boots, and they needed to be cut down to size. So certainly, when whatever happens in the terrorist underworld, to some extent, is also related to how the agencies perceive those developments. But I don't see, in overall terms, a change of heart by the Pakistani deep state, so to say, and wanting to, clean out its stables and make sure that these groups can't take actions of the kind they used to do in the past. I don't see that happening.
Also, the Pakistan government has accused India, not in as many words, but they've said that forces beyond the border are responsible for all these killings. Now in the light of what the United States has been alleging, and Canada as well, that we have somehow related to these killings in North America, do you think that there's a case that Pakistan could join this chorus as well and say that similar things have been happening in Pakistan as well?
Pakistan has been saying for a very long time, for at least a quarter of a century, that numerous acts of terrorism which have been carried out in Pakistan are the responsibility of Indian intelligence agencies. And they have similarly, for at least quarter of a century, spoken about developments in Balochistan being directly related to the acts of Indian intelligence. And similarly, in the old frontier province, now the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, there were also allegations in the past that TTP actions were derived from support given by Indian intelligence. So the fact that Pakistan makes these allegations now in the new context of what has happened in North America will not have much credibility. So this is a familiar charge. And to some extent, this charge and countercharge by India and Pakistan, people are used to all over the world. The fact also is that Pakistan has a well-established record of using these terrorist groups and these extremist groups to further its policy aims. This is again well known because of what has happened in Afghanistan since the 1980s and thereafter in Jammu and Kashmir since the late 1980s. So I don't think Pakistan adding its voice to the present situation will make much of a difference.
Right. So, you mentioned Afghanistan. Now, currently there's the forcible expulsion of something like over 1 million Afghans, and it's possibly the largest this century. How do you see this destabilizing Pakistan's western borders?
I think it's a very serious situation. It shows how limited are the choices and the options which are available to Pakistan presently in dealing with Afghanistan. They thought they had secured a great strategic victory by bringing Taliban back, and now they realize that the problems following that strategic victory are quite insurmountable. So this reaction of expelling these unregistered Afghan refugees in large numbers is, I think, a response born out of policy frustration and policy failure, because it is not going to make the situation better. If anything, it will make the situation and the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan even worse. The problem is that, what is seldom recognized is that Pakistan played an enormously positive role in giving refuge to very large number of Afghan refugees. And this has been for a period of some 30-35 years. at least 3 million refugees being hosted by Pakistan in its own territory when its own resources are so limited. But instead of getting any kind of positive outcome from this very generous policy, in fact, it has had negative consequences. And that is largely the kind of negative approach which Pakistan has had to Afghanistan. So what should have been a winner for them has in fact turned out to be a loser. And this expulsion of large numbers of refugees is going to have a very negative consequence.
Right. And so currently there are price spikes on in Pakistan, the economy is in turmoil, there's political instability, and literally the country is living on hand to mouth and IMF handouts and bailouts. Do you see any end in sight for Pakistan in the next couple of months? Or is this situation of instability going to continue even past the elections due next year?
Well, one outcome which is expected is that a successful election with a new government in place will mean that there is a new administration with greater credibility which can address these challenges. But the challenges are certainly quite massive, and they are not going to go away quickly. Just by changing governments or by change of policies, things are not going to improve in Pakistan quickly. There is a long haul ahead. And in fact, it is questionable whether Pakistan has the mental bandwidth and the policy toolkit to make policies which will make a difference in the medium and long term. There are people in Pakistan who question the possibility of such change in policies at all. So I don't think Pakistan's problems are going to end at any time soon. But it's also useful to remind ourselves that this does not mean that we are going to face a cataclysmic situation. To a great extent, Pakistan has always been in a state of crisis. So many worst case scenarios which are imagined in India, that there will be a catastrophic meltdown in the economy or there will be some other major social and political crisis, I think those scenarios are also somewhat far-fetched.
You can of course watch our documentaries Hunting the Hijackers and Intercontinental Terrorists only on the News9 Plus app.
You don't strike deals with terrorists.
You have to be able to assert your rights, your national interest.
I'm glad that a new India has found a way to at least take revenge.
Intelligence agencies who want to be assertive must have long memories.
One down, two to go.
It's an ordinary day in Karachi. The life of Pakistan's biggest city resides in its bustling streets. Its markets are its lifeline. Today, it is business as usual here. In Akhtar Colony, a furniture owner goes on with his usual drill. He opens his warehouse, shoots orders, dispatches consignments, everything looks normal, except it isn't. The furniture owner is shot dead in broad daylight.
Mumbai, November 26, 2008. Pakistan's deep state has launched its most vicious attack on India's commercial capital through its terrorist proxies. 10 Pakistani terrorists have landed in the city the night before. In an orgy of violence, they kill over 160 people using guns, grenades, and bombs. The city is gripped by fear. The terrorists are from Lashkar-e-Taiba, operating at the behest of the ISI and the Pakistani army. They are being guided by handlers who sit in a control room in Karachi, 900 kilometers away. 2 terrorists are engaged by the Mumbai police. One of them is captured alive. 8 terrorists are still free. They are holding hostages in 2 5-star hotels, the Taj Mahal Palace and the Oberoi Trident. Mumbai, November 27, 2008. The terrorists have attacked Shabad House, a Jewish prayer house in South Mumbai. The Jewish center is run by an Israeli couple, Rivka and Gavriel Holzberg. The terrorists have captured them. Then, one of the terrorist handlers calls from the Lashkar's control room in Karachi. The handler is worried the captured Lashkar terrorist Ajmal Kasab could blow the cover of Pakistan's deep state. The handler speaks to one of the frightened hostages, 49-year-old Norma Rabinovich, who was attempting to reconnect with her 2 children living in Israel. India happened to be the final stop before her flight back home.
Hello?
You talk to
I have already talked to them. I was talking to them personally just a few seconds ago, and they are making their phone call.
The handler hopes that the call he forced Norma to make would convince Indian authorities to release Ajmal Kasab.
Don't worry, Dana. Just sit back and relax and don't worry and just wait for them to contact, okay?
Yes, sir.
And save your energy for good days. If they contact right now, maybe you're gonna celebrate your Sabbath with your family.
24 hours later, he calls back. The talks have failed. The handler is angry. He orders the terrorists to execute the hostages.
Karem Bismillah. Karem Bismillah.
The voice giving instructions to the terrorists in Mumbai is of Sajid Mir, one of the Lashkar-e-Taiba's key commanders and an ISI asset.
He is the guy who's supposed to be the real brains behind what has happened in the 26/11 attacks.
He is not someone who leaves anything to chance. Every single detail is thought of beforehand.
He was a very important functionary in Lashkar-e-Taiba. I personally feel that he was a real man of ISI.
The fact that he is the only Pakistani on the FBI's most wanted list should indicate that what sort of caliber of a man we are dealing with here.
Yemen's Houthis have launched a series of attacks on merchant shipping in the Red Sea over the past fortnight. It's a proxy war unlike any seen in recent years. The Houthis are targeting ships with Israeli ownership plying around the Red Sea. And joining me to discuss this very interesting phenomena is Captain Sanjay Parashar, CEO of VR Maritime Services, joining us from Mumbai. Captain Parashar, welcome to the News9 Plus Show.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar. First off, are the Houthis non-state actors as is being made out, or do their actions in the last 2 weeks suggest a state hand?
Absolutely state hand, no doubt. I think it will be too naive of me to say that they are, trained force of last 1 year, 2 year. Right. I think they are much far ahead into that. So I think it's just that change of uniform, and they are probably state actors.
They're state actors.
That's how we look from the shipping viewpoint,
Right, right. So you're actually sitting there in Mumbai, you're at the center of the whole shipping business. tell us how the Houthis, this so-called ragtag non-state actors from the mountains of northern Yemen, how are they able to identify the ownership of these merchant ships that are plying around around the Red Sea? I mean, is this data really easily available at the click of a button, or is there something more than meets the eye?
I'm sure it's something more than what meets the eye. The bottom line here is that they must have been preparing this for last couple of years. I will say beyond 2 years, because I'm sure that there was Panama paper leaks, and a lot of politicians' names were involved across the Asian continent. But I think of the late, what has happened is people have, with this terrorist mindset, they have understood that if they really want to make themselves visible, I think they need to attack the commercial shipping lines. And after Audi and Saudi Arabia had an issue, I think they were a little bit successful there. So I think they have just taken a learning lesson from there, and they have shortlisted exactly, because there are only 70,000 cargo ships in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that if you want to shortlist the owners, it is very easy to Google search 25 to 30%, but to be so specific, to know the ownership details of a company which is in Bahamas or Cayman Island or Liberia or Panama, I think somebody must be doing his homework pretty well for last 2 years or probably 5 years.
Right. So who's doing the homework, Deepak? You've been studying this issue.
It appears that it's the Iranians who've armed. Iran has, perfected this art. We were speaking to Colonel DPK Pillai a few days back, and with his experience in Syria and the Middle East, there was one thing that he said, that in the course of the civil war in Syria, where you had Shia militias, running amok everywhere.
Yeah.
Iran had perfected the art of supplying, of supply chains in these war-torn regions.
Right.
What makes it even more interesting here is that with the kind of capabilities that the Houthis now possess, it's kind of, as if something's just been unleashed that cannot really be talked to. I mean, where do you meet the Houthis? You cannot approach them at any international summit.
That's right.
You can't go to, call up an embassy and register your protest.
Right.
And so you have this entity which is completely in the grey.
Yeah.
And yet it's being commanded for a very strategic purpose.
Very strategic purpose indeed. In fact, Captain Parashar, we were just looking at a map of the pattern of these non-states that Iran seems to have cultivated. They have ringed the entire Arabian Peninsula, which is one of the largest sources of oil in the world. All the choke points are manned by Iran. So you have the Bab el-Mandeb, which is where the Houthis are. You have the Straits of Hormuz, where the Iranians are sitting. You have the Mediterranean, where you have the Hezbollah and Hamas. Well, Hezbollah more than Hamas now. This is all part of a plan, don't you think, to kind of encircle these sea lanes of communication?
Of course, I think after the Second World War, when Russia, USSR that time wanted to have their own share of oil, and US said, we'll bombard you, otherwise go back. And Russians within 24 hours went back,
Right.
I think they must have done their study from 1944 onwards till now, and they know oil is important.
Yeah.
And given the Iran-Iraq war and the kind of warfare they have been involved in, I'm very sure that, there is a big think tank working behind all these shipping lanes. And Irano-Hind shipping, and then finally doing all this Iran kind of a business out of Dubai. So they have got really world-class access to get this kind of a classified information and then plan their strategies out of a place, which probably has a history of being their partners here.
Absolutely, and in fact the Houthis seem to be waging a very interesting kind of maritime warfare, and we were looking at the numbers. The war risk insurance premiums have all climbed up for all ships by $50,000 to $100,000 as big as that. So that's how has it made it difficult for ships to ply in the Red Sea?
Firstly, the increased tensions between Yemen and Saudi. After that, probably, they never thought that this will be another bubble which will probably come up and stay there for long.
Right.
So now if the vessels have to come from Cape of Good Hope, that is another 2,500 nautical miles. So you nearly spend a fuel which is close to $150,000 to $200,000.
Right.
Then you have, if you want to transit, then you have got war risk additional premiums. Then you have got kidnap and ransom premiums. So the premiums have gone up nearly 30 to 40% more, and I think they'll go 50% more. So the solution what they had earlier was, the crew is trained a little bit for ISPS code and they put some gunman, 4 to 6 gunmen on board.
Right.
Now, industry has given up on that. They know that this 4 to 5 gunmen on board won't work, They need probably 4 to 5 warships there.
Right, exactly. I mean, how does a gunman defend a ship being attacked by a ballistic missile or by a, cruise missile? This is what the Houthis seem to have unleashed on shipping there in the Red Sea. But thank you so much for your insights, Captain Parashar. Thank you very much. And we're going to be looking at that story. Closer home, the Indian National Congress is in a crisis. India's grand old party is now in power in just 3 states. The results of the recent assembly elections have dealt a blow to the party just as it was finding its mojo ahead of the 2024 general elections. What's in store for the party? We'll leave you with this upcoming story on News9 Plus. Thanks for watching.
I have no script left for the Congress party. I mean, I'm at pains to think about what the steps ahead can be. I mean, even if they were left with a political script, remember, if you have a script, you can make a movie.